Welcome to Pre-Scribed by Dr. Nathan Goodyear, where integrative oncology meets holistic healing. This podcast is your home for the latest in innovation, exploration, and elevation in all areas of integrative oncology, medicine, health, wellness, and beyond. Join me and a host of other innovators as we go from practicing to prescribing. Your daily dose of wellness begins now. IV vitamin C. It's not a one-trick pony. I've been in the integrative medical movement for quite some time now. It's 2024. Finished my residency in 2004. Got into the integrative medical movement in roughly 2005, early 2006. And IV vitamin C, I noticed very quickly, as related to hormones, there's kind of these flagship therapies in integrative medicine movement. And they just, they are, I don't want to say they're the hill to die on, but they're the hill where that flag is placed. And so when you look at it from a natural, holistic, or integrative strategy, there are certain therapies you just kind of look to that are representative of integrative medicine. And likewise, if people on the other side of the fence, if you will, the conventional therapies, conventional doctors that want to basically attack those that are using integrative medicine, there are certain flagship therapies that they want to undermine from a scientific perspective or from a public opinion or narrative perspective. And vitamin C is that flagship. You think back to childhood, junior high, and that capture the flag. Vitamin C is that. It is capture that flag. It is protect and preserve that flag. If, this is important, if the science allows. And what I discovered is, as it relates to hormones, those are clearly a flag and a flagship therapy in integrative medicine. But IV vitamin C is really even more than hormones, especially when you get into the aggressive intervention and especially as you get into cancer. So when you look at vitamin C, most people will look at it as it relates to cancer treatment. That's really where it's kind of been on the front lines. That's where a lot of the PR has been. And in future podcasts, we'll talk in great detail about how vitamin C can help in cancer, not just how it can help stand alone, inducing a detox crisis, energy crisis, and energy crisis in cancer cells, but not in healthy cells. But here, from a conventional standpoint, they want to marginalize IV vitamin C. But vitamin C doesn't just apply to cancer, because if they can undermine it as it relates to cancer, they can undermine it as it relates to anything. As I said in the title, it's not a one-trick pony. It's not. When you look at the mechanisms of, or the broad impact of high-dose IV vitamin C, it can impact things such as infectious disease, which we'll touch on. Viruses, bacteria, parasites can impact cancer, which we'll go into great detail about the impact of vitamin C, what we know, what we think we know, and what we don't know, and then the great details of the mechanisms of action. Talk about the inflammation, how vitamin C can impact inflammation. When you look at chronic disease of aging, almost all of them are the result of chronic inflammation. Of course, in cancer, inflammation is the bed in which cancer lies. Beyond inflammation, autoimmune disease, vitamin C plays a key role there, particularly in stabilizing T-regulating cells. Critical illnesses, such as sepsis. A key aspect of that, of course, my dear friend Paul Merrick published a study in 2016 and came under great ridicule. And there have been subsequent studies to come out that suggested that IV vitamin C doesn't work in sepsis, but timing is everything. Because if you have progressive sepsis and multi-organ failure, there's really not much therapies that can really help there if you have overwhelming infectious sepsis. Even vitamin C, antibiotics, or take your pick, if you miss the window of opportunity, you've missed the opportunity as a whole. And then surgery. Yeah, vitamin C has an impact on surgery. See, surgery causes immunosuppression. And if you're talking about cancer, a prolonged window of immunosuppression is not good, as we talk about local recurrence or distant seeding, that's called metastasis, and vitamin C can help there. But from the impact beyond just this title and the not a one-trick pony and all the mechanisms of action, we have to understand that conventional medicine, of which I am an MD, I'm also an MD homeopath, IV vitamin C, as that flagship, they want to marginalize it. And that's where that label alternative comes in. And understand alternative therapy, I think it is a phrase that is really designed to push IV vitamin C to the margin. Because if you push it to the margins, the people on the conventional side, they don't have to answer questions about it. They don't have to debate science. Remember, science is about the open debate and discourse of ideas. Discuss science, debate it, say, well, I agree with you on this conclusion or this study design and thus the conclusion, or I don't, vice versa. But if you marginalize something and declare it alternative, then what you do is you don't have to engage with it because it's not worthy of engagement. It's not worthy of debate. It's not worthy of discourse. The science is irrelevant and not worth my time to read because it is alternative. It is marginalized. So a better term probably would be complementary. And that would be because it complements therapies. And it's a standalone therapy, but it complements therapies. So if we wanted to use a kind of phrase to describe IV vitamin C in its broad aspect, well beyond cancer, I think complementary would be an effective choice over alternative. But beyond that, I think just a pure integrative therapy is the proper, accurate, and truthful approach to that. And when you look at another marginalized term, if you will, so if we marginalize IV vitamin C as it relates to, alternative therapy, doctors that use IV vitamin C in a wide variety of mechanisms and disease treatments, they might just get labeled as a quack. I've always thought, wouldn't it be interesting is if and when one got labeled quack is we actually had a Golden Quack Award and a ceremony to say, thank you very much. I've actually now stepped out and followed the science and stepped outside of where the narrative and the paradigm says we can only stay. And I now think independently. Big round of applause because now it's no longer groupthink. At least we're engaging in critical thinking, asking questions maybe we are uncomfortable asking and finding answers we may not know that we can find. And move from the groupthink to the critical think. And of course, I've been called a quack because I talked about ivermectin as a repurposed anti-cancer drug. I know, crazy, because there's science that supports it. Crazy that I would think such a thing, that a repurposed medication could actually have some anti-cancer mechanisms. And yes, ivermectin does. Check out other podcasts there. We've talked about that. So, and I'll be talking about that with other experts as it relates to the anti-cancer properties of ivermectin. But I look at that as a badge of honor, not because of the name, not because of the marginalization, but because somebody is clearly not liking the questions I ask. Rather, it would be better to say, you know what, let's talk about the vitamin C there. Let's talk about why you're using that. Let's look at the science and let's debate that. So, and I think what it comes down to is it really comes down to what a doctor is. The word doctor in Latin is docere. That can be translated to mean teacher. Doctor is not a giver of drugs, a cutter out of organs, a teacher. And it's not just teaching knowledge or information. Of course, wisdom comes from God, but it's teaching the empowerment to the individual, the patient. And it's teaching other doctors too, because with patients that maybe if they're diagnosed with cancer, an autoimmune disease, the body can heal. It has an inherent capacity to heal. And our job as doctors, per that word, the Latin origin, is to teach that individual, empower that individual how to heal. We can only do that through teaching. And unfortunately, today in a lot of medicine, there's very little teaching, if any at all, between doctor and patient. I might say the counter. There's probably a lot of teaching from the patient to the doctor as it relates to the science of integrative therapy. So you patients out there that are listening to this, keep it up. For you doctors that are listening to this, be open, be receptive. Doesn't mean you have to agree with the patient, but when a patient brings you knowledge and science, engage with them. You're a partner in this with them. They're obviously the star quarterback, but engage with them, read the science, and where there's reasons to agree, let them know. Where there's reasons to disagree, let them know. Patients are smart, and I think doctors we need to understand that and not underestimate our patients. So patients, keep teaching your doctors, and doctors keep learning, whether from your patients or from other doctors. Now, in contrast to doctor, the word physician is a Hebrew word raphe, which literally can be translated to healer. And I think just as much as teacher is being not appropriately utilized in the context of the word doctor, I think it's even worse for healer. When I go and speak, I love to get up on stage and actually engage with people with their eye contact. I know a lot of people get up on stage and they don't like to engage with contact, but I think it's great to engage with eye contact and see if people are understanding what you are saying, see if they're comprehending it. And you can see when people might be confused, so you might stop and try to clarify something. But one of the first things I'll say when I get up there is, how many healers do I have in the audience? And the reason why I ask that is because it's a question that really helps me to separate and identify who my audience is. Because if I have a bunch of people in the audience that they kind of cross their arms, cross their legs, kind of, turn and look off like, oh my gosh, you mean I skipped out on a cup of coffee to listen to this guy? He's asking me, am I a healer? What kind of, frou-frou medicine, what kind of crazy nutcase does he think I am? Well, actually, I think if you're being true to the word physician and where it comes from the Hebrew word origin, that's where I think you are coming from, being a healer. And I always get some of those in the audience. And so I will very specifically keep an eye on them as I talk to see how they engage or they don't. Do they completely close off? But then others, you see them just raise up their hands, oh, yeah, and, clap their hands. I've actually had that. And it's because they recognize that they are healers. Now, they may not provide that in a context related to the word physician, but they get that. And see, this is why I think integrative natural holistic therapies are so important, because they empower the body to heal. That's what they're designed to do. They're not obstructive like so many conventional therapies that we have, which are designed to, de facto obstruct a pathway. And that has both direct effects, maybe in a disease, but it has off-target toxicity effects, what we call side effects. And so that's a problem. But when you look at these natural therapies, they will target abnormal areas, but they will then protect healthy areas and preserve healthy areas. And so healing is what we are as physicians. That is truly at the core of what it means to be a physician, is to heal. And healing occurs more through natural therapies than it does through conventional therapies. Now, conventional therapies can help begin the process of healing. Say, for example, you walk out and you break a hip. No amount of vitamin D at that point is going to help you heal. But if you repair that surgically, then you come in with natural, holistic, and integrative therapies, you can actually help that healing process to accelerate. So I believe that being a physician is being a full picture of what it means to be a healer. Now, you're not going to find a lot of doctors out there like that, but maybe I'm just weird like that. Maybe I am just an alternative doctor, and maybe I did just win a Golden Quack Award. Now, obviously I'm being facetious, but what we are as doctors and physicians is we engage in the treatment of disease. Now, that word, I think, I'm not a big fan of it, because I think it identifies, it labels somebody. And once a person is labeled, it's hard to break that label off them. But again, I like to break down these words. That word disease literally means it's two words, dis-ease, lack of wellness. Oh, so a healer is to restore wellness. When you look at disease, so many people, they don't have hope when they're diagnosed with cancer. That's not, oh, good, I got the right kind of cancer. No. Nobody comes out of a meeting with a doctor where they're diagnosed with cancer with a lot of hope. It's actually a lot of fear. But if we're being true to what it means to be a physician and a healer, our job is to preserve wellness and actually to restore wellness. Now, to many, wellness means the absence of disease. But there's a lot of people in the United States alone that, you can clearly see that they may not have disease. They may not be diagnosed, but they sure are not well. Take that, for example, if somebody's obese, in chronic pain, not necessarily quote unquote a disease, but from the true sense of the word, dis-ease, they are not well. Now, we may not know the underlying recognition of cause. We may not know the ICD code, ICD-10 code for the diagnosis, so we can bill it to their insurance, right? I'm not well. Your insurance may go, well, what's that mean? What code do you want? No, I'm not well. I have pain. I'm overweight. I have chronic inflammation. Well, sorry, we can't bill for that. So you can see how this business model, insurance model, doesn't fit well into actually what it means to be a doctor, a healer, physician. So when we look at wellness, most will look at it as an event, but in actuality, wellness is a lifestyle. And so if we're focused on healing, preserving wellness, or healing from a disease to wellness, so restoring wellness, we have to understand we need to really focus on that lifestyle as well as any other treatments that we're doing. So even when I am treating a cancer patient, we're focusing on lifestyle and wellness because it's so critical in that process. Integrative medicine, I think, is the bridge that takes us from that disease mindset to wellness. And that word in Latin is integrationum. And when we look at the historical context of it, in French, it means the act of bringing together the parts of a whole. Latin means renewal, restoration, make whole, renew, begin again. Gosh, those are beautiful words, but that's what it means, integrative medicine. Integrative medicine, again, vitamin C is that flagship. Integrative medicine means the medicine, the therapies that renew, that restore, that make whole, that begin anew again. It's like poetry. Forgive me. I mean, it's awesome. But that's integrative medicine. It's that bridge from that disease mindset, which is lack of wellness. Take the pick of the name: diabetes, stroke, heart attack, autoimmune disease, cancer, to wellness through integrative medicine. So there was a talk I gave several years ago looking at this concept of vitamin C as not a one-trick pony. And so that's really where I'm pulling from this. And this is kind of the introduction, and then we'll go into infectious disease, cancer, inflammation, autoimmune disease, critical illness, and then surgery. But then I'll do some deeper dives in the future on vitamin C. But remember, vitamin C is the flagship. So let's go through those 5 points. Again, infectious disease, cancer, inflammation, autoimmune disease, critical illness, and surgery. But let's go back to the origin as it relates to vitamin C. Let's see how far back the literature, the research goes in these 5 areas. Not a one-trick pony, but 5 different broad areas of vitamin C in the treatment of what we think today disease or lack of wellness. Well, first is infectious disease. And there was an article from August 31st, 1939. Journal of Experimental Medicine. It was published by C.W. Jungblut, Jungeblut. So if I butchered that name, my apologies. But in this, he was looking at vitamin C in the treatment, experimental treatment of experimental poliomyelitis, polio. And quote, he said, a further contribution to vitamin C therapy in experimental poliomyelitis. So he was looking at vitamin C in the treatment of polio. 1939, that's going back almost 100 years. And it's quite profound when you think about it, because most people look at vitamin C as really kind of a modern concept or a modern construct that people are pushing on the general populace. But actually, infectious disease experts looking at pandemics, polio, we're looking at it almost 100 years ago. So I'm not saying that there couldn't be some impact in a recent pandemic. We'll touch on that too in a future podcast. And again, we'll lead with the science. That's important to understand. Lead with the science and let the conclusions follow. Sepsis. Origin, the first origin of sepsis with vitamin C in context published was actually in 1990. Circulating Shock journal. And the title of the article was Adrenal Gland Function in Reversible Endotoxic Shock. They're actually looking at vitamin C in trying to reverse shock with the adrenal glands. See, the adrenal glands, the two glands that sit on top of your kidneys, very important in the stress response. We all know this, but I know it. I had a pheochromocytoma. A tumor, right adrenal gland, was producing excess catecholamines, epinephrine, norepinephrine, adrenaline, and noradrenaline. And my body acted as if it was stressed. My blood pressure is about 300 over 130, though I was very healthy, eating a Mediterranean diet, running 3 to 4 miles a day. It was about 6'1", about 175, 180 pounds. My hemoglobin A1C was 7.2. I was not a diabetic. I was just producing stress signals that was causing my body to act as if I was running or fighting. Now, cortisol is another stress hormone that everybody focuses on, but in my tumor, it was that adrenaline and noradrenaline. But here, the adrenal glands are they need vitamin C. So when we're under a lot of stress, we deplete ourselves of vitamin C. And so when we take vitamin C in nutrition, in food, in supplementation, or IV therapies, there are certain organs and organ systems that are going to take it up preferentially. And the adrenal glands are going to do that because it helps in the vitamin C. So here, the vitamin C is going to help to reverse the impact of shock. Looking back at this in sepsis in an article published in 1990. So read it, not 1939, but 1990, that's 34 years ago. Yeah, I got that math right. So 34 years ago. So that's been around a little while. So, my dear friend Paul Merrick, who published in 2016 on sepsis with vitamin C, he was and is a frontier doctor. I mean, he's cutting edge. And so many people on the cutting edge of advancement in science, they get ridiculed. And Paul Merrick needs to have a statue built for him. He really does. And we'll talk, I think, a little bit in the future about how censorship is just damaging people. It's just awful. It's awful. It's meant to marginalize. But here, even 26 years before that, they were looking at vitamin C as it relates to sepsis. What about cancer? Polio, infectious disease, 1939. What about cancer? How far back does that go? Because it's really been probably the last 15 to 20 years where there's been a lot of great debate in the public arena about studies and people taking on vitamin C, especially the last 15 years, more and more people advocating for high-dose IV vitamin C, though clearly most people don't understand what high-dose IV vitamin C is. And I think it's clear to let you know that when we look at vitamin C, there's oral and there's IV. Oral vitamin C, taken by mouth, I don't care how much you take, you will never achieve a plasma level of vitamin C that is therapeutic. Now, we know from Reardon's work and others that the bare minimum plasma vitamin C, plasma ascorbic acid level, that will be directly cytotoxic to cancer cells is 1 millimolar. And when we look at the science as it relates to oral vitamin C, and part of this is because of what's called two-phase pharmacokinetics, that is, when the blood level is less than 70 micromolar of vitamin C, the gut will rapidly absorb vitamin C and the kidneys will rapidly reabsorb it so as to raise the plasma vitamin C levels. But the second compartment, that's the first phase compartment. The second compartment is then when the plasma levels of vitamin C exceed 70 micromolar. Then what happens is the gut absorbs it, and guess what happens? The kidneys excrete it. And if you're taking enough vitamin C, you understand that there's even a point where the gut doesn't absorb it, and you have a dumping syndrome, okay? So clearly, you will never achieve 1 millimolar of vitamin C by mouth. Now, understand that the actual target range, if we're looking at direct cytotoxic effect in cancer, it's about 350 to 400, or 20 to 40 millimolars. But 350 to 450 milligrams per deciliter. But in a millimolar concentration is 20 to 40. But you'll never achieve maybe 100 micromolar in the blood. Far from a tenth of the 1 millimolar. Now, if you use a liposomal, maybe 200. That's what the research shows. You will never achieve a therapeutic cytotoxic effect of plasma vitamin C with the oral route. But with IV vitamin C, you can achieve that. Okay, this is more recent research, really beginning with Reardon's work in 1990 and Linus Pauling with that in the 1970s, about 1976, 1978. But really this advanced in the 2000 thanks to that foundational work by those experts. But the concept of vitamin C in cancer actually goes way back, 1954, not too far from that polio. So this concept that there's no science to support vitamin C or that it's all recent, little history lesson in store. So 1954, Dr. McCormick, the title of the article, Vitamin C, Collagen, and Metastasis. Now, the theory here was that vitamin C deficiency was impacting collagen, and this led to metastasis. So the way to target the metastatic risk of cancer was to impact collagen through vitamin C therapy. That was the working theory, if you will, on this article. Not right, but there was a connection there that was somewhat right. Vitamin C and metastasis. Now, why is metastatic spread important? It's why 90% of morbidity and mortality exists in cancer. And so this theory in 1954, he was hitting a few buttons right. A few buttons were off, Dr. McCormick. But it goes back to 1954. Thank goodness we've made some advancement, but it shows you how long this concept of vitamin C in cancer has been around. Inflammation. We think about inflammation and we go, inflammation? What is that? Is it bad? Inflammation's bad. Well, if you get a paper cut, what happens? Well, ouch. It hurts. It's red. It's swollen and it may be hot. Those are called the cardinal symptoms of inflammation. Now, the reason why those are important there and not bad is they're protecting the body against secondary infection. They're recruiting immune cells there. They're recruiting healing cells there. And then eventually what happens is after that secondary infection is prevented and the immune system has done its job to protect further injury, it calms down and the healing takes place. Chronic inflammation, as it relates to the foundation for chronic disease, and understand that inflammation is the bed that cancer lies in. This kind of inflammation, it doesn't turn off. So it's like the redness, the pain, the swelling, the heat associated with that paper cut, and it just never goes away. And it just constantly festers. It's a festering wound. By the way, cancer is described as the wound that does not heal. Back in 1986. So when we look at inflammation as it relates to vitamin C, the first report and connection in the literature and the research actually was all the way back in 1948. I mean, we're going a long time. Some smart people back then. We didn't have all the sophisticated, mechanisms of research that we have today. Didn't have AI, artificial intelligence. But it's interesting that I think they did more with less, and so we probably had more intelligence than maybe the artificial intelligence has today. Interesting concept and open for discussion, I'm sure. But what's interesting about this article, it was looking at vitamin C as it relates to periodontal disease. Now, so many people talk about how disease begins in the gut microbiome. Don't forget about the microbiome in your mouth, your oral microbiome. So much of disease that we have begins in our mouth, and it's not necessarily what we put in our mouth, but it's about the microbes that grow in our mouth. So the title of this article, again, all the way back in 1948, was Acute Vitamin C Deficiency in the Periodontal Tissues, the effect of acute vitamin C deficiency upon the response of the periodontal tissues of the guinea pig to artificially induce inflammation. So vitamin C deficiency is going to induce inflammation. They basically intentionally drop the vitamin C levels to induce inflammation in these guinea pigs. Yeah, I understand the debate about animals, but what we're talking about here is just the topic and the timeline as it relates to the first presentation in the literature. What we know about inflammation, not what we look about, but what we know about inflammation. So, for example, cancer, it is a vitamin C deficient state, hypovitaminosis, as it's called. When we think about vitamin C deficiency in the disease concept, we think of scurvy. People going on the boats across the Atlantic Ocean, right? The Pilgrims, etc., and they didn't have, they developed scurvy. Many of them died. But here, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about metabolic scurvy. We're talking about vitamin C deficiency enough, inflammation causes it, that actually it creates metabolic dysfunction that then leads to eventually widespread dysfunction and disease. But here, inflammation, all the way back to 1954, poor guinea pigs, but connecting it to periodontal disease and the healing capacity there. Cytokine storm. So unless you lived in kind of a bunker or, were just not in tune to everything that was going on from late 2019 through 2022, you may have heard this phrase, cytokine storm. Now, cytokine is an immune signal, a group of immune signals within the immune system, and storm is just what it describes, storm. It is a storm of inflammatory confusion, is what it really is. It's a storm of cytokine production. So, and think about it this way, you have a spark, and the spark begins the process of the fire, but it's the fire that burns the house down, but it begins with a spark. And so there's a trigger that can stimulate the immune system, the spark, and the cytokine signaling is the spread of that spark to a massive fire that burns the house down. And cytokine storm, as it relates to vitamin C, goes back to 2003, actually a journal in gastroenterology. But in the 2019 to 2022, the cytokine storm was with reference to the SARS-CoV-2 of the pandemic COVID-19. And so when we talk about that virus, and we'll talk in greater detail about it as it relates to vitamin C, but that virus actually triggered an immune response. It was the immune response through things like interleukin-1, interleukin-6 that were actually damaging the lungs. So it wasn't the virus, it was the immune response to the lungs. It's like, there are those that break the law and then you try to cover that up, and the lies, the cover-up's greater than the original crime, right? And that's kind of what this is kind of getting at. It's that inflammatory response. It's triggered by that initial infection that then coupled with the intubation that was really, damaging and destroying lungs that then led to the death of many patients. But as it relates to vitamin C and cytokine storm, again, this goes back to 2003, nothing to do with SARS-CoV-2. The title of the article was Therapeutic Efficacy of High-Dose Vitamin C. Whoa, high-dose vitamin C on acute pancreatitis and its potential mechanisms. High-dose vitamin C. What is high-dose vitamin C? Well, I would tell you high-dose vitamin C is anything that helps us to achieve that 1 millimolar. Cannot be anything by oral. Understand oral vitamin C can epigenetically modify the gut microbiome, which is not a bad thing. But you can't get that high dose that is plasma that is 1 millimolar. Now, I would tell you the literature also, I think, suggests that 1.5 grams per kilogram, that's 1.5 grams, not milligrams, grams per kilogram, is really, when you're looking at cancer and a direct cytotoxic effect, high dose vitamin C, that's where you begin. That's where you begin. Then you follow plasma vitamin C's, not capillary blood glucose levels. They are not the same. I know there are those that advocate that they are, but they are not. And if your capillary blood glucose goes up, the only thing, and you're getting vitamin C, the only thing you can say is your plasma vitamin C is up. You cannot quantify the correlation. You cannot. So you have to check plasma ascorbic acid level. But here they're looking at it as it actually relates to pancreatitis. And here I think 50 grams of IV vitamin C would be appropriate. We had a patient at Williams Cancer Institute where there was concern about a recurrence in the pancreas for pancreatic cancer, but turns out that it was just pancreatitis. So whereas I had talked to a physician about giving 1.5 grams per kilogram, which is going to equate to 125 grams for that patient twice a week, which 3 times a week would be even better because of timing, though it was twice a week, and that's the bare minimum. But I said, because it's pancreatitis, let's lower it down to vitamin C. Let's lower it down to 50 grams of the vitamin C. But here, all the way back in 2003, therapeutic efficacy of high-dose vitamin C on acute pancreatitis and its potential mechanism. So not just that it's useful against reducing pancreatitis, itis means inflammation of the pancreas, but it's the mechanisms, the actual description. It's the what, the how. Pretty cool stuff, huh? Then autoimmune, how far back does that go? Later than 2000, pre-2000s? How about 2000? How about 1950? 1950. So it's back there with polio. It's back there with cancer. Published in a journal you might have heard of, Lancet. Autoimmune disease, treatment of rheumatoid arthritis with deoxycortisone and vitamin C. So you can see this lack of a one-trick pony vitamin C, broad wellness perspective and disease perspective, that is a lack of wellness. It goes back 75 to 100 years in many cases, not new. And it's really exciting because with time comes the test of time of a therapy. And yes, we don't know everything about IV vitamin C as it relates to cancer, autoimmune disease, inflammation, sepsis. And there are those that would try to destroy it. So, for example, let's say construct a study, design a study so that you introduce IV vitamin C and do so late in the sepsis process. That's designing a play to fail. That's designing a treatment plan, a study to fail. It's like lining up with a football team or basketball team and say, we want to not get that first down. We want to not make that bucket. We want to not win that game. It's not pretty. When you talk about the trillion-dollar industry that is medicine, it really begs one to ask a question. Is everybody out there that's working within the industry actually have the altruistic intentions for the patient, for medicine, or is there some attempts to preserve the status quo, preserve the money flow through the status quo? Critical illness. Now, I talked about my good friend Paul Merrick, but and that was 2016. But 1996, there was an article published on critical illness looking at total vitamin C, ascorbic acid, and dehydroascorbic acid concentration in the plasma of critically ill patients. Now, they weren't using this as a therapy; they were just monitoring and looking at the levels of ascorbic acid and the metabolite dehydroascorbic acid in patients that were critically ill. What we now know because of this great research, all the way back to 1996, these patients will be severely deficient. And so vitamin C will help to target in these critically ill patients, some of which may be infectious disease. It can actually target those causes of infectious disease, whether they be viruses, bacteria, or parasites, or it could actually support the immune system. Again, vitamin C in surgery counters the immunosuppressive state that accompanies surgery. And we'll talk in greater details about this. But here, some of this work began, almost 30 years ago. Super exciting. Surgery. Any gander about how far back that goes? Almost one of the oldest here. Annals of Surgery, October 1941. Wow. What was happening in 1941? A lot. Hopefully we'll never go back to that kind of broad war conflict. But the title of the article was Ascorbic Acid and Human Wound Healing. Isn't that interesting as it ties to vitamin C and cancer? Ascorbic acid is important in collagen, and that's important in wound healing. It's important in healing. As I mentioned, there was that early Dr. McCormick looking at vitamin C, collagen, and metastasis, that theory that wasn't exactly right, but he was onto something there. But here they're talking about, ascorbic acid in healing a wound. And remember what a tumor is called by Dvorak, 1986, a wound that does not heal. And so ascorbic acid is healing a wound, but also if it's healing a tumor that is a wound, it's healing a wound. Ascorbic acid and human wound healing, 1941. I'm of the opinion that every patient undergoing surgery should receive IV vitamin C. Now, it doesn't have to be major dosing, high dosing. It could be simple 12.5 grams, 25 grams pre-post. But what it does is it augments the immune system to augment the healing. Especially if we're dealing with something like cancer, it absolutely, I think, is a requirement. And it should be standard practice because it's sound science. See, when we're looking at disease, particularly when we look at cancer, we have to understand that what we soil and what we seed is the produce that we get. If we focus on a lifestyle that balances stress, that feeds the body, fuels the body, that is full of activity, that's full of relationships, that's full of joy, good sleep, we are creating a soil and we are planting seeds that will produce abundant wellness. But what we're doing a lot these days, take your pick of why, and not even, I'm going to introduce a topic here, epigenetic transgenerational inheritance of pathology. That is the expression of our genetics because of what we're exposed to and how that's inherited to our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. We think of a legacy of debt from our government. Thank you very much. But actually what they're giving us a lot of is a legacy of disease, of lack of wellness. And it's the physician's job to actually restore the legacy of healing to wellness. Thanks to Robert Kennedy and Make America Healthy Again. Shouldn't be a political issue. It should be something everybody embraces, whatever side of the aisle you're on. But what soil are we creating? What seeds are we planting, and how do we cultivate those? Because what we're doing in a lot of the U.S. and Western world today is we're creating soil and trying to plant seeds that just fuel disease, dysfunction, disruption, and early mortality. But so we're creating wounds. But if we give vitamin C, as the science supports, as the history timeline supports, and we'll go into the details of each of these 5 points, we can actually promote the body to heal, tap in to what it means to be a physician, teach the body how to heal, what it means to be a doctor, and turn that wound into healing, whether it be a wound itself or whether it be a tumor that is a wound. That's what it means to be a physician. That's what it means to be a doctor. And vitamin C, though it's not mentioned in the root word origin of healing, of Rofe, of doctor, of dossier, but in integrationum, integrative, restore, remake, renew. Vitamin C is not mentioned in any of those, but it's instrumental in each one of them. If you want to teach the body how to heal, vitamin C. If you want to heal the body, you need vitamin C. If you want to bridge from disease, lack of wellness to wellness, you need vitamin C. Vitamin C is not a one-trick pony. So I hope this has been a historical timeline that shows you really how far back IV vitamin C goes. Thanks for listening. If you want to learn more about all things vitamin C and all things integrative medicine as it relates to cancer and healing and wellness, disease prevention or disease treatment, not just cancer, I encourage you to go over to Pre-Scribed, that's pre-scribed.com. That website there, you'll find our blogs, you'll find our podcasts. Check out our YouTube page, our Rumble page. You'll find our intermediate videos there, as well as our long form videos as well. But if you have cancer and you're looking for the next generation of cancer care, but today, you'll find that at the Williams Cancer Institute. So go to williamscancerinstitute.com today and begin your healing journey. And it may just include vitamin C, but there we do intratumoral therapies. But looking at both of these websites, you have the ability to treat aggressive disease, prevent disease. That's really where we need to be. The best answer to cancer is never get it. Best answer to cancer is wellness. Treat disease, lack of wellness, by restoring wellness. And vitamin C is that flagship of integrative medicine, but it's the flagship of that bridge that is integrative medicine. Thank you for joining me, and we will see you on the next Pre-Scribed podcast. Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Pre-Scribed podcast. All references supporting this episode can be found on the prescribed.com website. That's pre-scribed.com. To get your next dose of medical innovation, make sure you subscribe to Pre-Scribed. We'll see you for your next refill.